Okay, I have a confession to make. I've never actually watched the Titanic movie. I know that seems bizarre. I grew up at a time when watching Titanic in theaters wasn't a matter of if, but when and how often. But you have to understand that I live on the east coast of Canada near the site of the actual Titanic disaster. As such, you can't walk down a street around here without getting hit in the face with snippets of Titanic history, and pop culture references have filled in the rest of the blanks for me on the movie narrative. Jack wins a boat trip, meets Rose, draws her like one of his French girls, her fiance's a dick anyway, boat sinks, door's too small, let's chuck a priceless artifact into the sea. Did I miss anything important? Cool. There's 3 hours of my life I can spend doing other things, like playing the Titanic board game. While the existence of a board game based on the Titanic movie isn't particularly weird, the timing of it certainly is. This thing came out in 2020, more than 2 decades after the theatrical release of the film it's based on. Weirder still is the fact that there's been no shortage of Titanic-themed board games released since 1997, but somehow this is the only one bearing the license to the movie itself. So here we go with Titanic the game, not to be confused with Titanic the board game, 2 games just called Titanic, Raise the Titanic, Sink the Titanic, Survive the Titanic, Dinner on the RMS Titanic, or Shuffling Deck Chairs on the Titanic. Just look for the one with the movie poster on the box. In Titanic, each player takes control of one of 5 characters from the film: Jack, Rose, Rose's overbearing mom, big stupid jerk Cal, or ship captain Theoden. Each player is tasked with traveling through the various compartments of the ship, collecting items and carrying passengers to lifeboats as the ship itself slowly sinks. There's some interesting mechanics at play here. You have a limited number of actions each turn that you'll use to move around the ship, pick things up, and deliver passengers to lifeboats. The puzzle here is using your actions effectively to maximize your progress based on where you are on the ship and what passengers and other pickups are nearby. It feels similar to Pandemic, and Pandemic is a fantastic game, so anytime your game invokes a phrase like, "it feels similar to Pandemic," you know you're on the right track. Also very Pandemic-like is the time limit imposed by the sinking ship. After every turn, a random compartment at the bottom of the ship will flood, washing away any items or passengers there and bringing the game one step closer to ending. Carrying passengers to lifeboats is the primary method for scoring points, so less passengers equals less means to score points, and the associated tragedy that comes with it, of course. The water level also poses a threat to the players. If a player is below the water line when an entire level is completely flooded, they're moved up to the next unflooded level and penalized a few points in the process. Speaking of points, it's worth mentioning that this is a competitive board game. Yeah, even though everyone has the same mission, rescue as many people as possible, there's a friendly side bet going on between the characters to see who can be the biggest hero during this life-threatening disaster. It's hilariously irresponsible, but for the record, this is the Titanic movie I would watch. I know that says something kind of horrible about me as a consumer of entertainment, but a film about a bunch of well-meaning yet oblivious people engaging in an inconsequential side game of heroic one-upmanship during a disaster is the kind of dark comedy schlock I never realized I needed in my life until I played this game. I mentioned collecting items earlier, and these pickups will contribute significantly to your irresponsible mission. Aside from the passengers, which we've talked about already, there's action cubes that will give you more actions per turn. There's also life preservers, which increase the number of passengers you can carry to a lifeboat at once. And finally, you have star tokens, which you can trade in at the end of your turn for cards that can score you more points or help you in other ways. These cards come in 4 categories. There's location cards, which will award you points for reaching a specific location in the ship. There's person cards, which give you a permanent bonus and are all named after side characters from the film, I think. I have no idea who Spicer Lovejoy is, but representing him with a picture of a loaded gun is likely going to come back to haunt him on his next passport renewal. Item cards don't award points, but will provide you with handy one-shot abilities. And then there's scene cards. Boy, are these things weird. There's one that tasks you with drawing a sketch of another player, which, if you consider the scene from the movie the card is referencing, could create some awkwardness in your gaming group. One card tells you to reenact Jack's death scene by hanging off the edge of the table and telling other players to never let go, and that's pretty grim. And then there's a card that encourages you to sing the chorus to My Heart Will Go On, so that card. Listen, I'm not trying to be the fun police here. I enjoy the odd party game that takes the players out of their comfort zone a little, but these cards, especially compared to every other mechanic in the game, feel completely out of place. It's almost as if the original design of Titanic was more of a social party game like Quelf or Balderdash, and over time it morphed into the strategy-like game that we're talking about today, but those party game cards still somehow made it into the final product. There are other thematic nods to the film that are actually pretty clever. Every player in the game has to get get to a lifeboat themselves before the ship completely sinks, but the first player to reach 20 points will be awarded with the Broken Door, which acts as their own personal lifeboat at the end of the game. I think we can all agree that Jack was not the first player to 20 in the movie. There's also the Heart of the Sea, which is always in possession of the player in last place, giving them an extra action on their turn. It's a nice little catch-up mechanic that can get a player who's behind in points right back into the game. Not exactly a throwaway item, right, Rose? A couple other minor design notes. This game encourages you to use dry erase markers to scratch off when an item has been collected from a room on the ship. All the components for items and passengers will easily fit into these rooms, with the exception of life preservers, which are really big for some reason. The decision to use markers to cross off components as they're collected seems finicky. Had they sized the life preserver tokens appropriately, it wouldn't have been necessary. We also noticed that in every game we played, one or more players accidentally walked through the wall of a room at least once. The overall aesthetic of this game is quite pleasing, but the walls of the individual rooms are tricky to spot at times. With a bit of practice, this would become less of a problem, but I feel like another visual design pass was needed to make the walls stand out more. At the end of the day, what we have is a board game based on a movie license that is way better than it has any right to be. It's far from perfect, but overall, Titanic the game, look for the one with the movie poster on the box, is a solid casual strategy game with some interesting ideas and a pretty good sense of humor about itself. Just throw that singing card into the sea.